In the vast chronicles of the galaxy, where light and darkness wage their eternal war, there are few names that endure beyond time itself. Among them, one stands apart, not as a mere warrior or ruler, but as something far greater, a force of nature, a shadow in the Force, Darth Revan. Neither Jedi nor Sith could ever fully claim him, and perhaps that is why his legacy refuses to fade. His path was not one of absolutes, but of contradiction, a man who embodied both salvation and destruction. He stood at the precipice of history, his choices shaping the fate of millions, yet his own destiny remained shrouded in mystery. A crimson mask concealed his past, but not his presence. He was revered, feared, and whispered about in every corner of the galaxy. To some, he was the greatest hero the Republic had ever known. To others, he was the architect of war, a conqueror whose ambition nearly consumed all. And yet, no matter how history sought to define him, the truth was never so simple. Revan was not bound by the rules of the Jedi, nor by the savagery of the Sith. He moved between the two, shaping both, defying both. His story was not just one of power, but of transformation, of war, of betrayal, and ultimately of a fate that even the Force itself could not predict. Revan, a name spoken in hushed tones, a name that lingered in the echoes of history. But before the war, before the mask, before the darkness, he was something else, a student, a scholar, a Jedi, a mind unlike any other. From the moment he set foot in the Jedi Order, Revan was different. His thirst for knowledge was insatiable, his understanding of the Force deeper than most could fathom. Masters saw his potential, but they also feared it. He was not content with blind obedience. He questioned, he challenged, he sought truths that others dared not explore. Some believed he would be the future of the Jedi, a leader, a beacon of hope. Others saw the danger that lurked beneath his brilliance. Power, after all, was a double-edged sword. It was not the dark side that threatened him, nor anger or hatred. It was conviction, the belief that he alone could see the path forward. But a legend is not forged in temples or classrooms. A legend is born in fire, shaped by war, and war was coming. A war that would force Revan to make a choice, one that would alter the course of the galaxy forever. To understand the fall of Revan, one must first understand that it was never a single moment, never a singular act of betrayal. His descent into darkness was not a choice, but a journey, one paved with necessity, with sacrifice, with the belief that the ends could justify the means. As a Jedi, Revan was revered. As a leader, he was unstoppable. But the Jedi Council saw something else: defiance. They watched as he questioned their ways, as he refused to accept their passivity in the face of suffering. They warned him that war led only to darkness, that intervention would cost him his soul. But Revan did not listen. He could not. When the galaxy burned, when entire worlds fell to ruin under the iron grip of the Mandalorian warlords, he saw what the Council refused to see. The war would not be won with words. The Republic needed a warrior. And so, Revan became one. He walked away from the Order, not in anger, not in rebellion, but in purpose. The Jedi turned their backs on the Republic, but Revan did not. He gathered those who would follow him, Jedi who shared his vision, soldiers who believed in his cause. He would bring the war to the Mandalorians, and he would not stop until they were crushed. But war changes men. And for Revan, the war was only the beginning. The Mandalorian Wars ravaged the galaxy like a storm without end. The Republic, weakened and fractured, could not withstand the onslaught. Planets burned, civilizations crumbled, and with each battle, the Mandalorians pushed further into Republic space. It was here, in the chaos of war, that Revan found his true calling. No longer bound by the Jedi Code, No longer shackled by the Council's teachings, he became what the Republic needed most: a leader of unmatched brilliance, a tactician whose mind could see victory before the battle had even begun. Under his command, the Republic's forces transformed. Strategy replaced desperation. Calculated ruthlessness replaced hesitation. The tide of war shifted, and for the first time, the Mandalorians faltered. Revan did not just fight them, he outthought them, outmaneuvered them. But with each victory, something within him changed. War demanded sacrifices. It required choices that the Jedi had sworn never to make. Revan made them without hesitation. To defeat the Mandalorians, he used their own brutality against them. He learned from them, adapted their tactics, and in doing so, he began to walk the fine line between necessity and darkness. And then came Malachor V, the final battle. The moment that would define everything that followed. For Revan, this was the war that changed everything. But what he did not yet realize was that the true war, the one that would define his legacy, was only just beginning. Power alone does not define a Sith or a Jedi. It is the will to wield it, the purpose that shapes it, that forges one's destiny. Revan was no ordinary Jedi, nor was he a Sith in the truest sense. He was something else, something beyond the rigid constraints of light and dark. His story was not one of absolutes, but of conflict, a battle not just waged in the galaxy, but within his very soul. To the Jedi, he was a cautionary tale, a warrior who strayed too far in his quest for justice. To the Sith, he was a conqueror, a ruler whose strategic brilliance commanded fear and respect. But in truth, Revan belonged to neither. He did not seek the chaos of the Sith, nor the passivity of the Jedi. He sought control over the Republic, over the Sith, and most of all, over himself. Yet control is an illusion, and power is a tide that cannot be stopped. For every victory, there was a sacrifice. For every war won, a part of himself was lost. He fought for order, but in doing so, he walked the path of destruction. He defied the Jedi, only to become something they feared. He ruled the Sith, only to reject the darkness that had given him power. In the end, Revan's greatest battle was not against the Jedi, nor the Sith, nor even the Republic. It was against the one enemy he could never truly conquer: himself. Most Sith vanish in death, their legacies swallowed by the tide of history. Most Jedi fade into memory, their names preserved only in the sacred halls of the Order. But Revan's name endured, not as a hero, not as a villain, but as something far more eternal, a legend. Centuries after his time, his choices still shaped the galaxy. His teachings, scattered in holocrons and whispers, guided Sith Lords who sought his vision and Jedi who feared his power. Revan had shattered the chains of the Sith, but in doing so, he had reforged them into something stronger. He had defied the Jedi, but in his defiance, he had forced them to change. And then, there was the mystery, the unanswered question. The final chapter left unwritten. For unlike so many who came before, Revan did not simply fade. His story did not end in death or triumph. It lingered, unresolved, a shadow stretching across the ages. Some say he sought redemption. Others claim he vanished into the unknown regions, searching for a war only he could see. But the truth is this: Revan was never meant to be understood. He was never meant to fit into the confines of Sith or Jedi. He was the embodiment of the eternal conflict, the cycle of power, the struggle between light and dark. And as long as that battle rages, as long as the Force moves through the galaxy, the name of Revan will never truly disappear. From the moment Revan entered the Jedi Order, it was clear. He was unlike any who came before him. Some Jedi were content with discipline, with following the will of the Force as it was taught. But Revan was different. He did not merely seek to learn. He sought to understand, to master, to unravel the very fabric of the Force itself. His mind was sharp, his curiosity relentless. He consumed knowledge at a pace that unnerved even the wisest masters, delving into teachings others feared to explore. History, philosophy, battle strategy, nothing was beyond his grasp. While others meditated on the will of the Force, Revan questioned it. He dissected its mysteries, sought patterns in the chaos, and saw what others refused to see. It was this brilliance that made him a legend even before the wars began. The Jedi Council recognized his potential, but also feared it. Power alone was not dangerous, but ambition, unchecked, could lead even the greatest minds astray. And Revan was ambitious. But his ambition was not rooted in arrogance or hunger for power. It was conviction, a belief that the galaxy could not be shaped by passive ideals alone, that true strength was not in silence or restraint, but in action. Yet action would require sacrifice, and sacrifice would demand choices that the Jedi were unwilling to make. Revan would not remain a student forever. Soon, the galaxy would call upon him, and he would answer, not as an obedient follower, but as a leader destined to reshape the stars. No Jedi walks their path alone. And for Revan, there were those who stood by his side, shaping his destiny in ways even they could not foresee. Among them was a fellow student, one who would become his closest ally, his fiercest rival, and, in time, his greatest betrayal. Alec, later known as Malak. Revan and Malak were inseparable, bound by shared ideals and an unbreakable loyalty, at least for a time. Malak admired Revan, not just as a friend, but as a leader. Where others hesitated, Revan acted. Where the Jedi Council preached patience, Revan demanded purpose, and Malak followed. Yet the Masters saw what they could not: the spark of something dangerous, something uncontrollable. Revan's influence over others was undeniable. Jedi were drawn to his vision, to his unwavering certainty. And Malak, headstrong and eager, was the first to fall under his spell. But there were others who tried to temper him, masters who saw not just power, but potential, if only it could be guided. Master K, who taught him the depth of the Force. Master Vrook, who warned against the path he walked. Some sought to restrain him, others sought to understand him. None could change him. These bonds, these relationships would shape his path. Some would lead him forward. Others would drag him into darkness, and one would break him entirely. But that was a story for another time. For now, Revan stood on the edge of history, unaware that the war that would define him was already on the horizon. The Republic was burning. Entire worlds lay in ruin, consumed by war, their people slaughtered or enslaved. And yet, the Jedi Council remained silent. They watched, distant and unmoving, as the cries for aid grew louder. To them, war was a path to the dark side. Intervention, they warned, would lead only to corruption. But Revan saw something else. He saw suffering. He saw a galaxy on the verge of collapse. He saw a war that could not be ignored. And with each day that passed, with each planet that fell, his frustration grew. He pleaded with the Council. He demanded action. But the Masters held firm. The Jedi were not warriors, they argued. Their duty was to the Force, not to the Republic's war machine. Revan refused to accept their passivity. He was not a man who could stand idly by as the innocent suffered. He had spent his life seeking knowledge, uncovering the deeper truths of the Force. And now, a truth had revealed itself to him. The Jedi's reluctance was not wisdom, it was fear. He was not alone in his defiance. Others among the Order felt the same. Jedi who could not reconcile their teachings with the horrors they witnessed. And when Revan spoke, they listened. He was charismatic, persuasive, a leader even among those who sought to temper his will. But leadership came with a cost. To defy the council was to walk a dangerous path. And to walk it meant embracing the unknown, stepping beyond the lines that had been drawn for generations. Revan made his choice. And soon, the galaxy would know the consequences. The Mandalorians were relentless. A warrior culture bound by conquest, they had descended upon the Republic with brutal efficiency. They did not seek diplomacy. They did not negotiate surrender. They sought only war, the crucible in which the strong would rise and the weak would perish. They had no interest in honor, only victory, and with every battle, they pushed deeper into Republic space, leaving destruction in their wake. Worlds fell. Millions died. The Republic's forces, unprepared and outmatched, crumbled before them. The Jedi remained on the sidelines, unwilling to intervene. The Republic's leaders, desperate and without hope, turned to Revan. And he, without hesitation, answered. This was the moment that changed everything. The moment a Jedi Knight became something more. No longer bound by the inaction of his masters, Revan gathered those who would follow him. They were warriors, thinkers, rebels, Jedi who believed that righteousness was meaningless without action. They would not wait for permission. They would take the fight to the Mandalorians themselves. And in doing so, Revan sealed his fate. For war is not a tool of the Jedi. It is not a place for those who seek peace. It demands sacrifice. It demands transformation. Revan had chosen to fight, but he did not yet realize that this war would not simply shape him. It would consume him. The battle for the Republic had begun, and with it, the first step toward the rise of Darth Revan. The Jedi Order had made its decision. The Mandalorian Wars were not theirs to fight. They would not risk their souls, nor compromise their teachings, even as the Republic fell to ruin. But Revan saw only weakness in their restraint. He had pleaded for intervention, demanded action, but the Council had spoken. And so he turned his back on them. This was not rebellion. It was necessity. If the Jedi would not act, then he would. And he would not act alone. Malak was the first to follow, loyal without question. Then came others, Jedi who had fought alongside Revan, who had seen the devastation firsthand. They too had grown weary of the Council's inaction. They too had lost faith in the Order's wisdom. They became something new. No longer Jedi, not yet Sith. Warriors without a code, defenders without masters. With the Republic's blessing, Revan assumed control of its scattered fleets. He studied the Mandalorians, adapted their ruthless efficiency, and turned their own strategies against them. Where the Jedi hesitated, Revan struck. Where the Republic faltered, he led. With each battle, the war began to shift. The Mandalorians, once unstoppable, now faced an enemy as relentless as they were. Revan did what the Jedi could not. He gave the Republic hope. But war does not leave men unchanged. Every victory demanded a price. Every battle demanded a sacrifice. And with each step forward, Revan moved further from the Jedi he had once been. He had defied the Order. He had become a leader. But soon, he would become something else entirely. Victory has a cost. Revan understood this, but the price of Malachor Fife was unlike any he had paid before. The battle had raged for days, the Republic forces pressing the Mandalorians into retreat. But Revan did not want a retreat. He wanted an end, a final, absolute victory. And so he turned to a power forbidden by the Jedi, a weapon so destructive that even the Republic feared its existence, the Mass Shadow Generator. A device capable of crushing entire fleets beneath the weight of their own gravity. With a single command, it was activated. The force of the blast ripped through Malachor's orbit, tearing ships from the sky, crushing legions into dust. Jedi, Republic soldiers, Mandalorians, none were spared. What remained was a graveyard, a shattered world filled with nothing but echoes of death. The Republic called it a triumph. The Mandalorians were broken, their leader executed at Revan's feet. The war was over. But something had changed. Revan had stood at the edge of destruction and did not turn away. He had wielded power beyond the teachings of the Jedi and had felt its pull. Malachor V was not just a victory, it was an awakening. And in that moment, Revan was no longer a Jedi. He had crossed the threshold, and there was no turning back. The war had to end. The Republic had fought for survival. The Jedi had debated in silence, and the Mandalorians had burned entire worlds to ash. But Revan did not seek survival. He sought victory. And for victory, there could be no compromise. Malachor V was the final battlefield, a world soaked in suffering, a graveyard waiting to be filled. The Mandalorians had made their last stand, refusing surrender, reveling in their final war cries. They believed in strength above all else, and Revan would show them strength beyond their imagination. The mass shadow generator was not a weapon of war. It was an instrument of annihilation, a power that defied the laws of nature itself. With a single command, Revan unleashed it. A great, unnatural force surged through Malachor's core. The sky fractured. The ground twisted and collapsed. Starships were torn from orbit, dragged screaming into the abyss. Mandalorian warriors, Republic soldiers, Jedi, all of them, caught in the void between existence and destruction. There was no escape, no victory, no honor, only death. Malak watched in awe, in terror. The Republic cheered, calling it a decisive blow, a moment of triumph. But Revan stood in silence. He had done what was necessary. But in doing so, he had glimpsed something terrifying. It was not just the Mandalorians who had been broken this day. Malachor had become more than a battlefield. It had become something deeper, something twisted and dark. And in its ruin, something within Revan had changed forever. Malachor V was silent now. The war was over. The Republic was victorious. And yet, for Revan, the echoes of that day never truly faded. The Jedi had warned him. They had spoken of the dangers of war, of how conflict led even the greatest down paths they could never return from. Revan had dismissed their fears. He had believed in his own will, in his own purpose. But Malachor had not merely been a victory. It had been something else, a wound upon the Force, upon history, upon himself. In the aftermath, something lingered in his mind, a weight he could not shake. The screams of the dying, the gravity of the destruction, the absolute, unrelenting power he had wielded, and worse than all of it, the silence. The terrifying realization that the Jedi had been right, not because war led to darkness, but because war demanded it. He had become more than a Jedi, more than a warrior. He had become something else, something undefined, something even he did not yet understand. He could not return to the Order, not as he was. The Republic, grateful for his victory, did not see the cost. They called him a savior. They celebrated his conquest. But Revan saw the truth. The Mandalorians had been the enemy, but now a greater enemy remained, the one within. He had stood on the edge of destruction and had not looked away. He had unleashed power beyond the teachings of the Jedi, and in doing so, he had become something they would never accept, something he could no longer deny. The Jedi had lost him. The Republic did not own him. The Mandalorians had fallen before him. So who, now, was Revan? He did not yet have the answer, but soon he would. Malachor V had left scars, on the galaxy, on history, and on Revan himself. But the greatest wound was the one unseen, the fracture within his own mind. He had broken the Mandalorians, defied the Jedi, and reshaped the war in his own image. Yet, even in victory, There was no peace. The war was over, but the echoes of battle remained. And among them, something else. A voice, a whisper, quiet at first, like the remnants of a forgotten dream. It was not the cries of the fallen, nor the regret of a warrior haunted by his choices. It was something deeper, something older. Beyond Republic space, beyond the known stars, there were secrets buried in the void. Malachor had been the first sign, a world steeped in darkness, its ruins filled with echoes of a power long since thought lost. But the true answers lay further still, in the unknown regions, where the Republic dared not tread. And Revan, seeking truth above all else, could not turn away. He followed the call, Malak at his side. Together they vanished into the depths of the galaxy, their fleet lost to the records of the Republic. They were not running, they were searching. And in the darkness they found it, a hidden empire, a shadow stretching across the stars. A power so vast, so absolute, that it had shaped history without the Republic ever knowing its name. The Sith. Not the fractured warlords of Korriban, not the remnants of an ancient people, but a true empire, led by a being who had existed long before Revan had even drawn his first breath. And he had been waiting for them. The whispers were no accident. The war, the fall of the Mandalorians, the devastation of Malachor, had it all been inevitable? Had Revan truly chosen his path, or had something far greater guided his every step? The truth no longer mattered. What mattered was what lay ahead. The Jedi had tried to shape him. The Republic had tried to control him. But now, standing before the greatest power he had ever known, Revan saw what he could become. Not a soldier, not a servant, but a ruler. Revan and Malak left as Jedi. They returned as something else. Gone were the robes of the Order, the titles of the Republic's war heroes. In their place, dark cloaks, crimson blades, and a purpose forged in the teachings of the Sith. But they were not followers. They were not mere students of a forgotten empire. They were conquerors. The Sith Emperor had tried to claim them, to bend them to his will. But Revan had seen through the deception. He had learned from the Jedi, from the Mandalorians, from war itself, and now from the Sith. He had taken their power, their knowledge, but he would not be their pawn. If the galaxy was to fall, it would not be under the rule of a hidden emperor. It would be under him. With a fleet reforged in secret, with the loyalty of those who had followed him into exile, Revan returned to known space. He did not declare war. He did not announce his arrival. He simply acted. The Republic, weakened from the war against the Mandalorians, was not prepared. Their fleets were scattered, their defenses crumbling. And then the Jedi felt it, a presence in the Force, once familiar, now unrecognizable. The hero they had lost had returned, but he was no longer theirs. Darth Revan had risen. The Sith had always been creatures of destruction, warlords, conquerors, agents of chaos who burned everything in their path. But Revan was different. He had not returned to the galaxy to destroy it. He had come to reshape it. To the Republic, he was a monster, a traitor, a warlord turned against his own people. But Revan did not see himself as their executioner. He saw himself as their salvation. The Republic was weak, fractured, vulnerable to greater threats lurking in the darkness. The Jedi refused to change, clinging to their ancient traditions, blind to the lessons of war. Someone had to take control. Someone had to impose order before the galaxy destroyed itself. And so Revan waged his war, not for chaos, but for purpose. He did not seek to eradicate the Republic. He sought to claim it, to mold it into something stronger. Where the Sith had once been ruled by passion and self-interest, Revan imposed structure. He did not allow reckless ambition among his followers. He crushed insubordination. He rewarded loyalty, punished betrayal, and demanded discipline. Even Malak, his most trusted ally, began to question the path they walked. For Malak, the Sith were meant to take, to conquer, to revel in the spoils of war. But for Revan, conquest was a means to an end. There was no room for indulgence, no tolerance for weakness. And yet, in his pursuit of order, he failed to see the chaos forming beneath him. Malak's ambition grew, resentment festering in the shadow of his master. The Jedi, though weakened, had not been broken. And in the darkness beyond the known stars, the true enemy, the one Revan had glimpsed in the unknown regions, remained untouched, waiting for its moment. Revan believed his vision was absolute, that through war he would forge a better future. But war does not breed obedience. It breeds rebellion, and the fire he had ignited would soon consume him. Was Revan truly a monster? Or had he been the only one willing to do what was necessary? To the Jedi, he was the greatest threat the Republic had ever known. To the Republic, he was a tyrant, an enemy of democracy, the architect of war. But to those who followed him, Revan was something else entirely. He was not a Sith Lord driven by rage or madness. He was a strategist, a visionary, a ruler who had seen the failings of the Republic and sought to correct them. Yet power demands sacrifice. The line between salvation and damnation had blurred long ago, and Revan had crossed it without hesitation. He had betrayed the Jedi, shattered the Republic, and reforged the Sith in his own image. He had become the very thing he once fought against. Or had he? For even as he waged war, he refused to let the Sith fall into their old ways. He had seen the Sith Empire in the unknown regions. He had stood before its ancient ruler and rejected his control. He had chosen his own path, one that was neither wholly Jedi nor entirely Sith. But history does not remember nuance. It remembers victors and villains, and Revan's war would soon end, not in conquest, but in betrayal. Malak had watched, had waited, had grown weary of standing in Revan's shadow, and in a single act of treachery, he struck his master down, believing that true power belonged to those willing to seize it. Revan, the conqueror, the visionary, the warlord who had defied fate itself, was gone. But the Force is not so easily denied, and neither was Revan. The war that followed was unlike any the Republic had ever known. It was not a campaign of brute force, nor a chaotic uprising of dark side zealots. It was precise, calculated, a war guided by the mind of a master tactician, Revan. Under his command, the Sith did not waste time with reckless slaughter. There was no needless destruction, no senseless violence. Every battle had a purpose. Every system that fell was another step toward victory, and every victory was another piece of a greater design. He did not seek annihilation. He sought control. Worlds surrendered without a fight, their leaders recognizing that resistance was futile. The Republic, still reeling from the Mandalorian Wars, was unprepared for an enemy that understood them so well, an enemy that had once fought beside them, that had learned from their weaknesses, that knew how to exploit every flaw in their crumbling defenses. The Jedi, who should have been the Republic's greatest shield, were divided. Some hesitated, unable to reconcile the truth that the enemy they faced had once been their greatest warrior. Others fell into despair, sensing the dark tide rising but unable to stop it, and some, drawn by Revan's power, abandoned the order entirely to join him. Victory followed victory. Fleets fell before his armada. Systems swore loyalty to his rule. The Republic, once vast and indomitable, now trembled on the brink of collapse. Revan had done what no Sith before him had accomplished. He had waged a war not through chaos, but through order. He had not sought to destroy the Republic. He had sought to claim it, to forge it into something stronger, something worthy of survival. And for a time, it seemed inevitable. The Jedi, the Republic, the very fabric of the galaxy, it would all bend to Revan's vision. But power breeds envy, and in the shadow of his reign, ambition stirred. There is a truth among the Sith, one as old as the dark side itself. Power is never shared. It is seized, taken. And when a master grows too strong, an apprentice must decide whether to serve or to strike. Revan and Malak had once been brothers in arms, bound by purpose, forged in the crucible of war. Malak had followed Revan without question, standing beside him as they defied the Jedi Order, as they embraced the teachings of the Sith, as they conquered the Republic. But war changes all things, and in time, so too did their alliance. To Revan, Malak was a weapon, powerful, ruthless, but lacking control. Malak wielded destruction with abandon, reveling in conquest, caring little for Revan's grand designs. Where Revan sought to mold the Republic, Malak sought only to burn it. And to Malak, Revan had become an obstacle. He was the rightful Dark Lord's second, the apprentice to a master who had no equal. But that was not the way of the Sith. The strong did not kneel. The strong did not follow. And Malak had grown tired of following. The tension between them grew, unspoken but undeniable. Revan demanded discipline. Malak tested the limits of his authority. The Sith empire they had built trembled beneath their rivalry, as those who served them whispered of the inevitable. There could not be two Sith Lords, only one. And so, as the war reached its peak, Malak made his move. Betrayal is the way of the Sith. And when the moment came, Malak did not hesitate. He turned on his master. He struck at Revan, believing that with one swift blow he could seize everything they had built. But Malak had underestimated him. Revan had not conquered the Republic by being reckless. He had not broken the Jedi by being blind to treachery. He had seen the betrayal coming. He had prepared for it. And Malak, though powerful, was not yet his equal. Not yet. But the war was not over, and the Jedi were watching, waiting. For if Malak could betray his master, then perhaps Revan himself was vulnerable. Perhaps the Sith Lord who had once been a Jedi could still be stopped. And so, as the battle between master and apprentice loomed, the Jedi made their move. The Sith had always been creatures of destruction. They rose through fire, conquered through blood, and fell to the same power they sought to wield. Their history was a cycle of betrayal, chaos, and ruin. But Revan was different. He was not a warlord, nor a mere conqueror. He was something far more dangerous, a ruler with vision, a Sith who did not seek to burn the galaxy, but to reshape it. Where past Sith had pursued personal power, Revan pursued control. He did not see the Republic as something to be destroyed, but as something weak, something flawed, something that could be reforged into something greater. The Jedi had tried to guide the galaxy through peace. The Sith had tried to claim it through war. Both had failed. Revan would not. He ruled with precision. He demanded discipline, not recklessness. The Sith Empire under his command was unlike any before it. It was not a scattered force of warlords vying for power. It was a machine, efficient, organized, relentless. His fleets moved with purpose, striking not to terrorize, but to subjugate. His soldiers fought not for glory, but for order. Even his use of the dark side was different. He did not let it consume him. He wielded it as a weapon, a tool to impose his will upon the galaxy. Passion did not rule him. Hatred did not blind him. He was not a slave to the Sith code. He was its master. But power, no matter how controlled, always comes at a cost. And Revan's empire, for all its strength, was built on a foundation of fear. Fear from the Republic, now gasping for breath beneath the weight of his dominion. Fear from the Jedi, who saw in him not just a Sith Lord, but a warlord beyond anything they had ever faced. And fear from within, the whispers of dissent among his own ranks, the growing ambition of Malak, who watched his master with envious eyes. Revan had done what no Sith before him had accomplished. But history is unforgiving. The Sith do not share power. The Republic does not forget. And the Jedi, no matter how broken, do not surrender. The greatest empires do not fall from the outside. They collapse from within. To rule is not to conquer. Any warlord can bring destruction. Any fleet can lay waste to planets. But to build an empire, one that would last, one that would stand unchallenged, that required something greater. Revan was not merely a warrior. He was an architect. He saw the Republic not as an enemy to be shattered, but as a system to be corrected. The bureaucracy that had weakened it, the complacency that had nearly doomed it, all of it needed to be reforged into something stronger. Under his rule, the Sith Empire was not a chaotic horde, but a structured force, disciplined and efficient. He established a strict hierarchy. Power was not given, it was earned. The weak did not rise, and the strong did not waste themselves in petty rivalries. The Sith were no longer a fractured cult obsessed with destruction. They were an empire with purpose. And at its head, Revan did not rule through fear alone. He ruled through vision. There were those who saw what he was building and swore loyalty. Republic officers, once his enemies, defected, recognizing his strength. Jedi, disillusioned with their failing order, abandoned their code to serve him. They did not see him as a tyrant. They saw him as the only one capable of saving the galaxy from itself. But even the greatest rulers have enemies. And Revan's enemies had not been idle. The Jedi had been waiting, watching, planning. They knew they could not defeat him through war. His fleets were too strong, his forces too loyal. But there was another way, one that the Sith had always feared. The mind can be broken, the past can be erased. And soon, Revan, the conqueror, the visionary, the architect of a new order would be undone, not by the blade, but by the Force itself. Among the Sith, betrayal is not a possibility. It is a certainty. It is the very nature of their order, the foundation upon which they rise and fall. And Revan, for all his brilliance, for all his mastery, had ignored the oldest truth of the dark side. Power is never shared. It is seized. For years, Malak had followed Revan, had stood at his side as a brother in arms. He had fought beside him in the Mandalorian Wars, embraced the dark side at his command, helped build the Sith Empire that now threatened to consume the Republic. But Malak was never a ruler. He was a warrior, a creature of brute strength and raw fury, and he had grown tired of standing in his master's shadow. Revan's war was one of precision, of strategy, of careful control. But Malak saw it differently. To him, war was not a tool. It was the only truth that mattered. And where Revan sought to shape the Republic, Malak sought only its destruction. He had waited. He had watched. And when the moment came, he struck. It was in battle, as Revan led his forces against the Republic, that Malak betrayed him. With the Republic fleet battered and broken, victory was all but assured. But Malak, knowing he would never take power while his master still lived, turned on him in the chaos of war. His fleet fired upon Revan's flagship, not as an act of desperation but of ambition. A direct assault meant to erase the Dark Lord from existence. Malak believed that with Revan gone, the Empire would be his to command. That the Sith, ever drawn to power, would follow the strongest. But Malak had underestimated one thing: Revan's foresight. The Dark Lord had not conquered the Republic by being blind to treachery. He had not built an empire by trusting blindly in loyalty. He had always known that Malak's ambition would drive him to act. He had foreseen the betrayal long before the first shot was ever fired. But what even Revan had not foreseen was the second enemy lurking in the shadows. The Jedi had been watching, waiting. And when Malak struck, they saw their opportunity. For all his power, for all his foresight, Revan was still only mortal. And on this day, in this moment, his fate slipped beyond his control. The Jedi had hunted him for years, waiting for the moment when he would falter. And when Malak betrayed him, when his fleet was thrown into chaos, when the Dark Lord was left vulnerable, they seized their chance. Led by Bastila Shan, a Jedi of unparalleled skill in battle meditation, the Republic launched its strike. Bastila's power in the Force was unlike anything the Jedi had seen in generations. She did not fight with a blade alone. She waged war through the minds of those around her. She strengthened the weak, instilled doubt in the strong. Even the Sith, for all their dark power, faltered beneath her influence. Revan, injured, betrayed, and surrounded, stood against them. He had faced entire armies and emerged victorious. He had conquered the Republic, broken the Jedi, and built an empire through sheer will. But against Malak's treachery, against the combined might of the Republic fleet, against Bastila's unrelenting assault, he fell. Yet the Jedi did not kill him. They could have ended him in that moment, could have struck him down and erased Darth Revan from existence. But they did not. Instead, they took him. They shattered his mind, wiped his memories, erased the Dark Lord from history, leaving only a broken man behind. And so the war changed. The great conqueror was gone. The Republic, against all odds, had been given a second chance. But the Force is not so easily denied. And neither was Revan. The Jedi Order had always believed in redemption. Even in the face of darkness, even when confronted with the most powerful of Sith, they clung to the belief that no soul was beyond saving. And so, when Darth Revan fell into their grasp, they did not execute him. They erased him. It was a decision born of desperation. The war had left the Republic fractured, the Jedi depleted. With Revan's armies still a looming threat, and Malak ascending as the new Dark Lord, the Council sought not only to end a Sith reign, but to turn one of their greatest enemies into an asset. Through the Force, they shattered his mind, stripped away his identity, and reforged him into something new. His memories, the countless battles, the conquests, the betrayals, were locked away, buried beneath layers of falsehoods. He would awaken as a soldier of the Republic, a man with no past, no legacy, no claim to the power he once wielded. To the Jedi, it was a victory. They had not merely destroyed a Sith Lord, they had undone him. They had taken the darkness and replaced it with light. But the Force does not forget. Revan's name still carried weight in the galaxy. His actions had shaped history. His influence still lingered in holocrons, in whispers, in the minds of those who had followed him. No matter how deeply the Jedi buried the past, it was not truly gone. For Revan was not merely a man, he was an idea, a force of will too great to be erased. And in the depths of his mind, in the places even the Jedi could not reach, something remained. A shadow, a whisper, a memory waiting to be reclaimed. The Jedi had gambled. They had sought to rewrite fate. But fate cannot be denied. A man without a past is a man without questions. And for a time, Revan accepted the life given to him. He was a soldier, a warrior fighting for the Republic, a hero molded by the Jedi. But the mind is not so easily rewritten. At first it was subtle, a dream of a battle he did not remember, a voice speaking in a language he had never learned, a flicker of something familiar when he looked upon the ruins of a war he did not recall waging. Then the visions began. They came in fragments like shattered glass, memories buried but not broken, a battlefield drenched in fire, a crimson blade igniting in the dark, the weight of a mask in his hands, the whispers of an empire that no longer served him, but had once bowed before him. He asked questions. The Jedi gave him no answers. They told him it was nothing, the remnants of war, an illusion. But Revan had spent his life searching for truth, and the truth could not be silenced. Something had been taken from him. He could feel it. And the deeper he searched, the clearer it became. He was not who they said he was. The past was clawing its way back. And when the truth finally emerged, it would not be the Jedi who decided his fate. It would be Revan himself. The mind is a fragile thing. It can be broken, reshaped, rewritten. But the soul, who a person truly is, can never be erased. Revan had been given a new identity, a new purpose. The Jedi had stripped him of his past, reforging him into the hero the Republic needed. But truth is not so easily buried. The echoes of who he had been whispered through his mind, waiting to be heard. At first it was doubt. Small things, flashes of memory that did not belong to him, knowledge he could not explain. Then it was certainty. The more he searched, the more he uncovered. He was no ordinary soldier. He was no mere warrior. He was something far greater, something far more dangerous. And when the truth came, it came like a storm. He had not always been a servant of the Republic. He had been its greatest threat, the architect of war, the Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Revan. But was that truly who he was? Or was that just another lie, another mask placed upon him? The Jedi had tried to shape him. The Sith had tried to claim him. But neither had asked the most important question. Who did Revan choose to be? As the Republic's forces prepared for their final battle, as the war reached its climax, Revan stood at the center of it all, not as a Jedi, not as a Sith, but as something else entirely. And waiting for him, at the end of it all, was Malak. The man who had once been his brother, the apprentice who had taken everything from him, the last obstacle standing between him and the truth of his own destiny. Betrayal is the way of the Sith, master and apprentice, ruler and usurper. It is an unbroken cycle, one that had shaped the fate of the galaxy for generations. And now it would end as it always had, with one Sith standing and the other fallen. Malak had taken everything from Revan, his empire, his power, his very identity. But for all his ambition, for all his strength, he had never escaped his master's shadow. He had not built an empire, he had stolen one. And now, as Revan stood before him once more, the past had come to claim its due. Malak had once been a friend, a brother in arms, but that man was long gone. All that remained was the Dark Lord of the Sith, desperate to prove that he had surpassed the one who had made him. And yet, even in the heat of battle, even as the two clashed with the fury of the Force itself, there was something else, something unspoken. Regret. Malak had never been Revan's equal. He had always followed, always obeyed. And when given the chance to rule, he had not known how. Now, as his strength failed, as Revan stood over him victorious, there was only one truth left. Malak had not beaten Revan. The Jedi had not beaten Revan. The Sith had not beaten Revan, because Revan had never truly been theirs to claim. The war was over. But the legend of Darth Revan was only beginning. At the heart of the war stood the Star Forge, a relic of unimaginable power, an ancient machine capable of forging fleets, weapons, and war itself. It had been the lifeblood of Revan's empire, the source of his dominance. And now, as he stood before it once more, it became something else, a test, a choice. Revan was no longer the man who had built this war machine, nor was he the pawn the Jedi had sought to mold. He was something else entirely, a man who had walked both paths and emerged with the power to choose his own fate. The Sith still whispered to him, their voices clinging to the edges of his mind. They spoke of destiny, of unfinished conquest. They told him that the galaxy was weak, that only through his rule could it be saved. All he had to do was take back the throne that had always been his. But there was another voice, one quieter, but no less powerful. It was the voice of a man who had seen war, who had built an empire on blood and fire, and who now understood the cost. He had seen the cycle, Jedi and Sith, Republic and Empire, endless conflict without resolution, and he alone had the power to end it. The Starforge was more than a weapon. It was a temptation, a promise of absolute control. And standing at its heart, Revan faced the choice that would define his legacy. Would he reclaim the darkness, or would he break the cycle? The fate of the galaxy rested in his hands, and this time, the choice was truly his. The Sith had always believed that power defined a person's worth, that the strong ruled and the weak perished. But what then of a man who had held ultimate power and chosen to let it go? Revan had once conquered the Republic. Now, he fought to save it. He turned against the Starforge not as its master, but as its destroyer. The power he had once wielded would not be reforged. It would be erased. The machine that had birthed fleets, that had nearly drowned the galaxy in war, would not endure. His former followers saw it as betrayal. His enemies saw it as redemption. But to Revan, it was neither. It was simply the only choice left to him. Malak, blinded by his own ambition, had believed himself stronger. But strength had never been the true measure of a ruler. Control had never been the true measure of power. In the end, Malak was only a man grasping at something beyond him, desperate to hold on to a throne that had never truly been his. And so, he fell. As the Starforge crumbled, as the Sith Empire collapsed upon itself, the war ended, not through conquest, but through sacrifice. Revan had begun as a warrior. He had risen as a conqueror. He had ruled as a Dark Lord. But in the end, it was not the blade that defined him, not the empire he built, nor the battles he had won. It was the choice. And that, above all else, was what made him truly legendary. Legends rise and fall, but some names refuse to fade. Revan is one of them. The Jedi called him a traitor. The Sith called him a usurper. But history could never quite decide what he truly was, a warlord or a savior, a villain or a hero. The truth, as always, was far more complex. His story did not end with the destruction of the Starforge, nor with the fall of his empire. Even after choosing to stand against the darkness he had once embraced, the mystery of his fate remained. Revan did not stay to rebuild the Republic, nor did he seek refuge among the Jedi. Instead, he vanished, leaving behind only questions, only whispers. Some say he left in search of something greater, something beyond the war he had fought, that he sensed a greater threat lurking in the void, a darkness that neither the Republic nor the Sith could comprehend. Others believe he was seeking himself, a man who had been Jedi, Sith, and everything in between, searching for an answer that had eluded him his entire life. And then there are those who claim he never truly left, that his influence lingers in holocrons, in the minds of those who study his past, that his teachings, his choices, continue to shape the fate of the galaxy long after his body was lost to time. Revan was never meant to be understood. He was not meant to be confined by the ideologies of Jedi or Sith. He walked a path no one else dared to follow, and perhaps that is why he has never truly disappeared. Revan's war ended, his empire fell, his name became myth, and yet his legacy endured. The Sith who came after him studied his rise and fall, drawing inspiration from his teachings. Some sought to mimic his methods, believing that his strategic mind, his disciplined rule, was the key to true power. But they misunderstood. Revan did not seek power for power's sake. He did not embrace the Sith's lust for destruction, nor the Jedi's rigid self-denial. He sought balance, strength tempered by purpose, control without chaos. And the Jedi, despite all their efforts to erase him, could not deny his impact. The Order was never the same after Revan. He had exposed their greatest weakness, their fear of action, their hesitation in the face of war. His defiance had forced them to change, to become more than just keepers of peace, but guardians who understood that sometimes, to protect life, one had to fight. His philosophy did not belong to the Jedi or the Sith. It transcended both. The weak could not be allowed to rule, nor could power be left unchecked. The Force was not a weapon to be hoarded, but a responsibility to be wielded. This was the lesson he left behind, one that would inspire those who followed, shaping the fate of the galaxy for generations. Because Revan was more than a warrior, more than a Sith, more than a Jedi. He was proof that destiny is not written in absolutes, and that is why his legend will never die. Revan had sought balance, but was such a thing ever truly possible? Could a single being forge peace in a galaxy where war was eternal, where light and dark clashed without end? He had defied the Jedi, believing their rigid adherence to passivity would doom the Republic. He had defied the Sith, knowing their hunger for power would only bring destruction. But in the end, the very forces he had tried to control had consumed him. The Jedi sought to erase him, to mold him into something they could understand. The Sith sought to reclaim him, to turn him into the monster they had always believed he was. Neither saw the truth. Revan had never belonged to either of them. He had walked his own path, forging his own philosophy, one that embraced the strength of the Sith and the wisdom of the Jedi. But the galaxy was not ready for such an idea. The Jedi rejected anything that strayed from their teachings. The Sith saw balance as weakness. And so, Revan's dream of breaking the cycle, of reshaping the Force itself, remained just that. A dream. Perhaps he had been doomed to fail from the start. Perhaps the weight of history was too great for even him to shift. Or perhaps his failure was not in his ideals, but in the galaxy's refusal to change. For Revan's greatest battle had never been against the Republic, the Sith, or even the Jedi. It had been against the fate that bound them all. And in that fight, even the greatest warrior could not stand alone. Time has a way of burying the past, of erasing even the greatest figures from memory. But some names refuse to be forgotten. Revan is one of them. Centuries have passed since he walked the galaxy, since he defied the Jedi and the Sith, since he stood at the crossroads of destiny and made his choice. And yet, his presence lingers. His legend endures. His name is spoken in the halls of the Jedi, whispered as a warning, a tale of what happens when one strays too far from the path. His name is revered in the remnants of the Sith, an example of power and ambition that few have ever matched. And among those who seek the truth beyond the teachings of either order, he is something else entirely. Proof that the Force is more than light or dark, that it is something far greater than either side is willing to admit. His holocrons remain, scattered across the stars. His teachings, though incomplete, still shape those who dare to listen. And some say his presence lingers in the Force itself, waiting for the moment when the galaxy is ready to hear what it once refused to understand. Revan never found his balance, but his legend remains, a whisper in the Force, an echo that refuses to fade. And as long as the war between light and dark continues, so too will the question that defined him. Was he a savior, a tyrant, or simply a man who saw the truth before anyone else? Perhaps, in time, the galaxy will finally be ready to answer. Legends end in triumph or tragedy, but Revan's story defied both. It did not conclude with victory, nor was it marked by defeat. Instead, it faded into uncertainty, leaving behind only questions that have persisted for centuries. After the war, after the fall of Malak, and the destruction of the Star Forge, Revan did not remain in the Republic he had once tried to dominate. He did not seek power among the remnants of the Sith, nor did he fully return to the Jedi who had once erased him. Instead, he disappeared. Some say he sought peace, that after years of war and conflict, he wished only for solitude to live out his remaining days in quiet contemplation. Others believe he had seen something greater, something more terrifying than the war he had just fought. For during his exile in the unknown regions, before his rise as a Sith Lord, Revan had glimpsed a darkness beyond anything the galaxy had ever known. A presence that had shaped history from the shadows, manipulating both Jedi and Sith alike. And if the whispers are to be believed, he did not turn away from that threat. He walked toward it. There are no records of what he found, no tales of his final battle, no accounts of his last days. Did he confront this unseen enemy? Did he fall in battle, alone in the void, fighting a war no one else understood? Or did he succeed in his mission, preventing a cataclysm before it ever reached the Republic? No one knows. But his absence did not go unnoticed. Those who knew him best felt his presence vanish, as if he had become something beyond life, beyond death. The Jedi searched for him, but found nothing. The Sith longed for his return, but he never came. And so the legend of Revan became something else, not just a story of power, war, or redemption, but of mystery. A name that persisted through time, whispered in the corridors of the Jedi Temple, etched into the teachings of the Sith, and spoken by those who sought something beyond the endless conflict between light and dark. Did Revan find peace? Or did he meet his end in the darkness, far beyond the reach of history? Perhaps one day the galaxy will learn the truth. Or perhaps some mysteries are never meant to be solved.